What's up guys and welcome back to Moaning. If you guys are new here, then what is up? My name is Erica. Heya, how you doing? And if you're into the history of the ancient Greeks and the Romans, maybe you're just into the mythology and maybe you just need to know about Achilles' shield in Homer's Iliad. God, I have tripped over that line so many times, I can't even tell you guys. But if that's what you need to know, then this is not only the video for you, this is also the channel for you. You guys are gonna wanna hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you know every single time I post in the future. But onto the topic of today's video, and we are now at book 18 on our little Iliad series, so why don't we just dive into the narrative and we can just tell you all about that. So if I could summarize book 18 into one sentence, it would be Achilles, Thetis, and new armor. That's really the important stuff that happens in this book. There's obviously a lot of chat. There's always a lot of chat in this book between all the characters where you're like, what was the point of that? That obviously happens, but the most important thing is that Achilles does this little thing, Thetis comes to help, and new armor is made. If you literally write that on any single paper, if you're just like, book 18 involves these three things, you will get an A. That is literally how this book works. That's the most important thing. But I should probably get into a little bit more detail so that you know what all those things mean and how they all play a part in sort of setting up the last little teeny tiny chunk of the Iliad. So let's just get into that. So book 18 opens exactly where we left off from book 17, right? So we have the body of Patroclus being brought back to the Greek camps. We have Antilochus who's running ahead of them to go and tell Achilles before the body just shows up and they're like, hello, it's your dead best friend. You know, like they need the warning in there. So Antilochus is going to be the warning, and that's sort of how it opens, right? So Antilochus is running to the camps, and when he arrives at the Greek ships, I mean, Antilochus was like not doing so well after that run because all of the emotions have like suddenly hit him and he's like, I just have to deliver the worst news to the scariest man of the Greeks. When Antilochus reaches the ships, he finds Achilles sitting outside of his tent, of his camps, of the ships themselves, and he's sort of talking to himself, right? So we get this little moment of Achilles sort of trying to figure out what's going on and why Patroclus hasn't come back. So he's sort of saying that he thinks Patroclus is probably dead if he can hear the Trojans sort of approaching the Greek camps. He's like, this is the only logical conclusion, that Patroclus did the one thing I told him not to, which was to attack Hector, which I told him not to do without me. But if they're getting this close, Patroclus wouldn't have let that happen unless he was dead. So we know that Achilles is thinking this way, but it is key in this moment to remember that Achilles doesn't know, okay? Achilles has no idea that Patroclus has just died and has actually been killed by Hector. So when Antilochus approaches, we know the reaction is not going to be pretty. Antilochus comes up behind Achilles and just starts weeping. Like the first thing he does is he starts crying and he's like, Achilles, man, I am so sorry with what I'm about to tell you. And then he does fill in Achilles on exactly what we just read, on exactly what Achilles just said, like basically everything that we know. Antilochus relays that to Achilles. And initially Achilles is quite calm when he's listening because he's like, tell me the whole story before I react. So he's quite calm, listens to the whole thing. And then this description is really hard for a lot of us to read because it's described as this black cloud of sorrow that just kind of like sits over Achilles. And as he hears the news of Patroclus, he drops to his knees and he starts wailing. Like Achilles grabs at the ground beneath him, like grabs at the earth and pours it over him. So it goes all over his hair, onto his face, all over his toga. It's described as black ashes, even though it's like just obviously the earth, not actually Patroclus's ashes. That would be really dark. But it's described as being ash-like. It goes all over Achilles as he's wailing. And our man starts pulling at his hair. He starts beating his chest. He's crying. He's attracting a lot of attention to himself, to be quite honest, which is a very female thing to do. Like this is not normal for a male reaction. Men don't react this way in ancient Greece, in ancient literature. This is a purely female way of lamenting. It's very popular on pottery. If you guys need to know that for class, here's an example of what that would look like on pottery. We have these common depictions of women wailing and lamenting when someone dies, usually a man, not usually a woman. But yeah, now we have Achilles doing exactly what a woman would do for Patroclus. That's a lot. Now Achilles isn't doing this alone. He does actually have some female mourners who come out of the ship. So all the women that they have who Patroclus knew and all of this, they start seeing Achilles wailing, and so they then start joining him. They're beating their breasts, they're crying, they're tearing at their hair. Once again, this is very normal practice for lamenting in ancient Greece. So don't read that and think, oh, that's a bit of a reaction. Like that's totally normal. So they start doing that reaction. Now they're all so loud, bear in mind, that then Thetis, Achilles' mother, from the sea bed, hears this and she starts wailing, and all of her sisters, all of the daughters of Nereus also start wailing. They're not really sure why they're wailing. She's more so sad because she knows that like, well, if Achilles is wailing, it probably means that his death is upon us, so that's why she's crying, as opposed to like, oh no, Patroclus died, like she doesn't really give a shit. But she does care about Achilles and his imminent death because Patroclus has seemingly died. So that's why they're all crying down on the seabed. Thetis then does say everything that I just said. So don't worry, this isn't me just like inferring of why she's crying. Like she does literally say this to all of her sisters. And because of that, she then goes up to the shore. She goes up to Achilles as he's literally now lying on the ground crying. She goes up to him and she grabs his hands and she's just like, tell me everything. Please tell me what happened. Because again, she's not really sure why he's crying. I don't know why Thetis is constantly listening to Achilles cry, but not listening to the little bit before where he explains why he's crying, because Achilles constantly has to relive trauma so that his mother is in the loop, and I just don't understand why this is part of the narrative. But okay. All jokes aside though, what Achilles says is genuinely heartbreaking, and this is why lots of people will read the Iliad and they'll say, maybe they were more than just friends, and maybe they were really, really in love. Because Achilles says to his mother that he doesn't understand why he would exist without Patroclus, basically. He says that there's no pleasure in living without his best friend. He says that he loved him more than he loved any of his other friends, and more than he loves himself. He says that he loves Patroclus more than he loves his own life, and so there's absolutely no point of him living on without Patroclus by him. And that is so sad. Like when you read this man crying to his mother, he's in so much pain. He's just done the woman relenting reaction thing. This is why people think, well, there's a little bit more to this. Because even though we've seen people in other myths get really sad when their best friend dies and all of this, Achilles' reaction is on another level. I'm not saying that as like to make fun of him as like, oh wow, you need to chill. Absolutely not. Like this is heartbreaking. This is so sad. So you should definitely go and read that for yourself if you have to read this for class. Because once again, I will never do anything like this justice. It's just me telling you like, well, this is really sad. It is. You need to go and read it. But Achilles acknowledges his fate to his mother and he says like, look, I understand why you're going to be sad because now that Patroclus has died, it does solidify my fate, and therefore I know I have to go and kill Hector. And it's putting all of these things into motion that Achilles knew, because bear in mind, the prophecy before the Trojan War. So he knows all of this. And he says to his mother, this must be really, really difficult for you, but I don't have armor to go into battle right now, so at least you have a little bit of time. He also tells her that he's willing to let this anger for Agamemnon be a thing of the past. Thetis is pretty proud of him in this, and Thetis is the one who is just like, okay, don't do anything drastic just yet. Like, I appreciate you have to go and attack Hector. I'm really sad that I'll never be able to welcome you into my halls again as my son. All of this sort of like really sad conversation. But she's like, look, I'm gonna go and like get some crap from Hephaestus so that you won't be armorless going into battle. Because Achilles was saying that he doesn't have any armor to go into battle. He can't fight. The only person he knows whose armor he kind of likes is big Ajax, but he's like, he has that. He's on the battlefield fighting for Patroclus. So like, fat lonely status. So he does say that to her. And Thetis is like, no, we're gonna get you some new armor. So just like chill here for a hot second. If you need to show your face, fine. But like, don't go into battle until I return with the armor from Hephaestus. And Achilles is like, sick. While Thetis runs off to Olympus to go and chat to Hephaestus, we then cut back to the battlefield because we need to see Patroclus' body coming back into the Greek camps, because obviously it's not easy. And Homer wants to highlight that for all of you, that this is a trek, okay? So as the people, Meriones and Menelaus, as Meriones and Menelaus are holding this body and they're walking out with it, if you don't remember from last book, we have the two Ajaxes, big and little Ajax, on either side of the body, sort of fighting everybody off with a bunch of other people, but they're the main ones. So they're fighting everybody off. And actually, we're told now that Hector has gotten hold of Patroclus' feet 3 times. He's gotten that close to the body and that close to dragging him down. Because remember, this is important, Hector wants the body. Because he wants Patroclus' head on a stake. A stick. Is that the same thing? Whatever. He wants it on a stake, basically. He wants it on a pike, he wants it in the ground, he wants to be like, this is Patroclus' head, this is Achilles' best friend. So that's why he wants it. And he's grabbed hold of the foot 3 times. And all 3 times, both of the Ajaxes have been like, absolutely not, go away. We're even told that the rest of the Trojans would have actually been super successful in getting Patroclus' body had not Iris been sent down by Hera in this moment. Literally, as Hector is doing all this stuff, Iris is sent down to Achilles. Now, I know that probably sounds really weird, like, well, how does that affect this? One sec, I promise it does make sense. So Iris goes down to Achilles, she then talks to Achilles, and she's like, hey boo, you actually have to do something because Hector still wants Patroclus' head on a stick, so you have to go out there, at least show your face, just to like make sure that they're a little bit scared, so that maybe they'll give way on attacking a little bit. Maybe most of the Trojans will get away from Patroclus's body. We just need the body to get into the camp. So it's now your time to shine. And instead of asking the important questions, obviously he doesn't. Achilles is like, what god actually sent you down here? I'm curious, Iris. And Iris is like, oh, funny you should ask. It was Hera, but you can't tell Zeus because he doesn't know that I'm here. Achilles again reiterates though that he doesn't have any armor, and Iris is like, that's fine, I'm not telling you to get out into battle, I just want you to go and literally show your face to the Trojans. And so Achilles is like, okay, well that I can do. So Iris leaves Achilles, and Achilles starts walking off towards the front of the Greek camps, right? So he's now walking from one end to the other, and as he's on this long ass walk over there, Athena puts like all of this glory in him. She puts the aegis on him, the like shield thing, and she also puts this like gold cloud above his head. This is important because it pops up in later mythology, so it's important that I note it now, that there's this gold cloud placed above him, so it looks like a flame, right? He's described as sort of looking like a signal flame, and so as he walks out towards the Trojans, he's literally seen as like this person with fire on his head, this big ass shield, and it's Achilles anyway. So this is a very terrifying image for the Trojans to suddenly see when after not seeing Achilles for like 2 weeks at this point. Now Achilles just stands there and screams. That's literally all he does. He lets out this like massive war cry, and Athena actually stands next to him and she sort of helps amplify it by adding her own cry to it. So for all the people, it just seems like an uber loud war cry. And Achilles gives out this thing 3 times, and everybody, all the Trojans are like, the did that come from? And they are shuddering on the battlefield, okay? These men are terrified of Achilles. They are terrified to see his face, and they are terrified that he is about to come out because they know they're all gonna die. Like, that's what happens when Achilles fights. So all of them start turning around and running back to Troy. They're like, absolutely not. We are not hanging out for this. In fact, the horses themselves of the Trojans, like the Trojans' horses are described as being so scared that before anybody even like turns them around, the horses are turning around. They're like, absolutely not, we've seen this man before and I'm not being here and we're not having you here either. So they just start charging back to Troy by themselves. People are terrified of Achilles and all he has to do is stand there. That is absolutely important to understand how Achilles is on the battlefield, that they see him and they're like, this. Because of this reaction from the Trojans in being terrified by Achilles, it gives the Greeks more than enough time to walk Patroclus's body back into the Greek camps. And as they get in, then Achilles follows him behind and he is still crying. It is, oh my heart. The Greeks now safe in the Greek camp, right? So now we cut to the Trojans, and the Trojans have all decided to have this little assembly, and all of them are far too nervous to sit down, so they're all standing up, having this little assembly. And actually it's Polydamas who stands up in front of them. He says that now that Achilles is back out fighting, it is absolutely not safe for them to be sleeping outside of the city gate. So he says, look, this is what I'm proposing. I propose that we all go back to Troy, we sleep in the marketplace, we get up before dawn, and then we start sort of guarding the walls at that point. Because if we are out here, he said with Agamemnon leading, it was not a problem. But with us out here, when Achilles is here, Achilles is a madman, he's absolutely insane, and I'm not risking it, and I'm not risking any of your lives, because he's worried that if they do, Achilles is just gonna come, kill them all, and they're all gonna be food for the vultures. Hearing this, yeah, Hector is like not happy about this. So he then says to the rest of the Trojans, he's like, right, none of you are allowed to do what Polydamas just suggested, and if any of you do, then like we're cutting you from the team. Instead, he tells them to all sleep outside, and he's like, Zeus is clearly still in our favor and all of this kind of jazz, woohoo. And then all of the Trojans then obviously cheer in approval because that's what armies do in the Iliad. So they all start cheering in approval for Hector, and Homer then chimes in and he's like, what fools? Because obviously we know things that they don't know, and we know that they're going to all die pretty much. So that's what happens there. And then that scene just comes to a really nice little close, and we cut back to the Greeks, right? So we cut back to the Greeks, and the Greeks are now burying, well, they're not burying Patroclus yet, but they're sort of trying to clean up his body, and they're trying to like, you know, just basically say goodbye before they have the actual burying pyre moment thing. So Achilles is still crying, he's still wailing, and he just tells us sort of exactly what's about to happen. He says that he's not going to rest until he kills Hector. He says that like these are all the things that have to happen until the end of the book, basically. He then does add that he must kill 12 Trojan children in order to like express how sad he is about Patroclus's death, which I always read that and I'm just like, I don't know if that's the way that you should be dealing with this, but like, okay, Achilles. But he does say that not until Hector is dead and these 12 Trojan children are dead will Patroclus actually be buried, or will he be burned. He's like, up until that point, Patroclus will just remain here chilling, right? Okay, so that's now the plan that is set in motion. So then after Achilles has made this announcement, we then have a bunch of the women come in to clean Patroclus's body. And we kind of know how this is done now, you know, so they start like with anointing it with oil and cleaning up all of the scrapes, and they had to like boil some water to make sure that he could be clean, and then they put this like clean, thin sheet on top of him and all of this sort of stuff. So they do that to make sure that Patroclus is like looking pretty. As that's happening, we then cut to Zeus and Hera, who are having this lovely little conversation that we just sort of jump into, where Zeus is like, well, there's no way that Achilles would just do that on his own accord, so you must have gotten involved. Clearly, you really, really like the Trojans. Extreme sarcasm with that. Hera obviously replies being like, shada, I hate them, so any chance to cause them sorrow, I will do it. Hence why now I want Achilles to go and kick their little booties. And that's literally where we leave that conversation. I don't know why that's included, but that teeny tiny little snippet is where we then leave to jump to Thetis, who has now made it to Olympus. So the first scene that we get on Olympus is actually Hephaestus in his little workshop, right? And he's like making things. He actually has like 20 tripods lined up along the side of the wall with like given a description of what they look like, how he's building them, and actually that he has to add these wheels to the bottom of them because he wants them to be able to wheel themselves into the hall where all of the Olympians sort of go to chat. And I always read this and I just think that's like a wheelie chair. Like basically what he's coming up with is a wheelie chair. He's got all these tripods, he's putting all of these little wheels on the bottom of them so that they can just wheel about. They don't have to get up. I'm like, hello? That is what I use at my desk. What the hell? Totally not the point of this little scene. But either way, Thetis walks in, not to the workshop, but to the sort of grand hall entrance of where Hephaestus lives, and his wife, who is this woman called Charis, not Aphrodite at this point, which I know a bunch of people will be thinking, but we have Charis who comes out, who's his wife, and she says to Thetis, like, hey, I love that you're here, like, it's really nice that you're here, but what the fuck are you doing here? Like, you have literally never been here before. So Charis leads her over to this beautiful chair and is like, you know, being very hospitable. And Thetis tells her that the reason why she's there is to talk to Hephaestus. So Charis then goes to tell Hephaestus, she's like, hey, Thetis has come here and she wants to talk to you. I'm not really sure why, she didn't give me all the details, but like, that's what she's doing here. And Hephaestus then relays to her, again, in the same sentiment where he's like, wow, this is somebody that we really love. It's weird that she's never been here before. However, he does tell us that the time when Hera threw him from Olympus and he had his great fall, right? So earlier in the book, they said that it was Zeus's fault. Now they say it's Hera's fault. It does kind of change constantly depending on the myth, but either way. So he then says that during that myth, when he fell onto the ground, right? When he comes down from Olympus and he's now lame, right? His legs now don't work. Thetis is the one who helped him. So he says, she's allowed anything in this house. Like, we love her. You know, we have to be the utmost politeness to her. We have to be the kindest to her. She deserves the world. So go and entertain her and I will come out and talk to her and see if I can actually help her with what she needs. But entertain her in the meantime. So Charis goes out and when she leaves, then he starts basically cleaning up his workshop. And we get a very long description of everything that he does in order to clean up his workshop and himself, including his hands and taking the oil off of his face and his little apron. Like, we get all of that described in this moment, right? And so once he's all clean, he then goes out to greet Thetis. When Hephaestus goes to see Thetis, this is one of my favorite parts in the entire poem, because I just think it could have saved us so much time if we knew that this moment was in the book. So Hephaestus goes out and he's like, hey dude, love you lots. What are you doing here? Like, what can I help you with? Basically, obviously he doesn't say exactly that, but that's kind of what he says to her. And Thetis then, in the space of 30 lines, she summarizes the entire Iliad to him, basically being like, this is everything that you've missed happening on the battlefield. And you're just like, it only took 30 lines for you to do that. And yet we are now 18 chapters into this thing, and you did it in this amount of time? And so obviously Hephaestus is like, oh, you need armor because of all of this stuff that you just described. Yes, I can do that. Just hold on like 2 seconds. But I literally, every time I read that, guys, like, I'm getting overwhelmed thinking that this moment exists, because I'm just like, if only students knew that lines 431 to 462, I have it on my post-it note, that those lines describe the entire story summarized. It would save you guys and me. It would have saved past me so much time. Anyways, as I said, Hephaestus is like, no problem, babe, I got your back. And so he then goes back to his workshop to go and make the shield. Now, honestly, when I was thinking about how I was going to structure this episode, I didn't know how I was going to do the shield. I kind of thought I would take out my whiteboard and I would draw it out for you guys and do a nice little voiceover, because you guys seem to like my stick figures when I did that for a battle scene. So I thought about doing that. And then I thought about just describing it to you guys, because it is such an important and iconic moment in all of mythology, in all of ancient Greece. this shield of Achilles is referenced absolutely everywhere because it is made by the gods. It is one of the most important things to be crafted by Hephaestus. And then I realized that I just couldn't do it any justice. And so unfortunately, I'm smiling because you guys know what's coming now. Don't get mad at me, guys. I'm gonna tell you guys to go and read it. This is something that's so important and it is absolutely not difficult to follow. So you guys need to read the shield for yourselves. And I think that this is a way to encourage you guys to go back to the text. I sometimes worry that you guys watch these instead of reading, and a number of you have said that too. So I want to make sure that I have the perfect balance between sort of helping you through the story, but also encouraging you to go and read it yourselves, because you guys can handle it. The shield is not difficult. All they do is describe every single ring on the shield and what Hephaestus, like, can you use the word embossed for that? Like, I don't really know, but he sort of, does this little thing and he makes it really pretty and it depicts these perfect scenes on it. And I think that you guys, once again, you just need to read it. So don't hate me. Please don't hate me. But yeah, that's my advice on the shield. But once Hephaestus finishes the shield, he then continues making the rest of the armor. So we get a description of all of the other pieces that Achilles obviously needs to go into battle. He can't just show up with a shield. That would be effing useless. So Homer then describes the rest of it. And then Hephaestus lays the armor out on the floor in front of Thetis. And Thetis is like, wow, this is super pretty. This is super hot. I'm like amazed by this. This is great. So she then picks it up and then she runs down to Achilles to give it to him. And that is the end of book 18. I'm thrilled we finally got here. That episode was an absolute challenge to film. I cannot even tell you guys the process. This has taken me like 2 hours to do this episode. But I'm so glad that we got here because next week, starting from next week, you don't have to wear black anymore, by the way. I know that I yelled at you in all of the episodes leading up to this one. You have to wear black. Now we're Gucci. Now we can graduate from black because now we're sort of used to Patroclus being dead at this point. Now we're just really getting to the end of the book where we know that Hector has to die. But yeah, so that's why we're leaving you guys today, and we'll be seeing you next week with book 19 and 20, running up to the end of the Iliad. So we'll see you guys then.